Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, you Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! Hey! If you're watching this as its own video, welcome to this. We're going to be talking about Golarion today. This is also being recorded on the day as a different video, so if you watch that video too, you notice the change. I do this sometimes, record two videos separately. And Twitch side's here, YouTube side, you're here too. We're diving into another country today, sort of. We're talking about Belkzen, the Hold of Belkzen, which is where the Orc hordes have ended up, mostly. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to Orcs and Golarion, and that's an entirely different discussion, which I am planning for in the future, coming up in a week or two. But in the meantime, we can talk about the nation that has them in it. The thing is, talking about the Hold is talking about a little bit about Orc history and a little bit about some important aspects of the way that Orc culture works within Golarion. Because the Hold of Belkzen is a representation of basic Orc culture and the evolution of it that it's been having. So, before I begin though, I, as usual, like to shout out what books you might want to follow and check out yourself if you are interested in this. Now, I'm going to throw out a bunch of information from this book here. I've reviewed it, and I'm also going to be using the Pathfinder Wikipedia page to review some of the basics here. From the book here, most of the areas information I'm going to be providing is some of the breakdowns of some of the regions and stuff like that. There are a lot of places that you can find information out about the Hold itself because it shows up in a number of books and places too. So, but this is the major book that if you wanted to provide it, this is a little technically outdated again because the Pathfinder story and world has evolved a lot over the last, honestly, 8 years. Remember, it's 23 or something like that, I think it is. God, you know, the dates are sometimes hard for me to remember. It is 4723. I'm sorry. Because this book here, the present year in it was 4715, so 8 years ahead. And it does provide some of the connection with some of what was going on with the Orc Society and the Hold of Belkzen. But, again, things have been evolving. The Pathfinder campaign setting also provides some stuff about this one, but I feel like this book here trumps that one by far. By far and ahead. So here is the symbol of the Hold. Actually, we'll use this one. It's a little bigger here for this one, and we're going to revisit the symbol when we talk about something else too. But Orcs are found throughout Golarion. But the thing is, the largest amount of Orcs, the most plentiful, the most densely settled, is the Hold of Belkzen. It's an unforgiving wasteland filled with scrub brush, steep mountains, uneven badlands. Water is scarce and generally limited to a season flood road, basically. So it's a very harsh land. Very harsh. Not really a great place there. Its capital is Urgur, and the rulers are Orc champions and the various clan leaders. It has basically tribal hordes, desperate war bands that kind of rule over it. And it is a violent place that only more recently has beginning to evolve and change. And here's a nice map of the Hold, so you get an idea of where it is. Oops, excuse me. I can also tell you what areas are next to it, which is probably an important thing to mention when we're showing off the map here as a whole. Belkzen has a border with the Realm of the Mammoth Lords to the north, the World Wound and Ustalov, and Last Wall. To the east, to the south is Normathus, and to the west is, of course, Varisia. There's a lot of mountain ranges that block that, though, there. Let's talk about the history of the Hold, because that's an important thing. So, Orcs emerged on the surface of Golarion from the Darklands at the end of the Age of Darkness. This was the same time that Dwarves arrived back in there. They were driven back into these desolate regions, like here in north-central Avastian, by the Dwarves. They're ancient enemies. Basically, once the Orcs and Dwarves were battling themselves to the surface, each other, and the Dwarves were winning the basically war. But One particular orc warlord known as Belkzen counterattacked. He vowed to reclaim all the lost holdings that the orcs had made on the surface before the dwarfs were driving the dwarfs back underground. Thousands of determined orcs rallied under his banner, the banner of the Black Sun. The horde reached and besieged many dwarven fortresses, including Kolkardar in negative 3708 AR, when the Age of Darkness and Emergence was in negative 5102. That was one of the 10 Sky Citadels. In a climactic final battle known as the Battle of the Nine Stones, the orcs captured Koldakar and put the population to the sword. This is during the Age of Anguish. This was uniting those scattered orc tribes that had been brought forth. This was basically the defining moment of this battle. Yeah. The city of Urgir, meaning first home in orc language, is built upon that sky citadel, that sky fortress. It is the new home of the new capital. It is the capital of Belkzen. There was a dwarven counterattack. Belkzen reinforced the city's defenses. They could not retake the fallen Sky City, though. There was this time period with the orcs of the region known as the Reckoning, a kind of golden age for them that lasted until Belkzen's death, or disappearance a decade later, and negative 3698. Yeah. The city itself still remains a symbol of orc power, though. Again, when Belkzen was lost, the tribes that had been united under him fell apart, bickering ensued, battles, power struggles. What could have become an orc kingdom and built up something broke apart down to their basic tribalism again. And things lasted this way in the Hold for quite some time. That the orc tribes were tribal, fractured, battling each other for wealth, land, power. That all changed thousands and thousands of years later when the Whispering Tyrant arrived in 3203 AR. He unified the orcs under his banner through force. Their undead lord, they assaulted Ustalav, conquered a lot of central Avastia. And the Shining Crusade defeated the Whispering Tyrants, his armies. The orcs of Belkzen were driven back to their territory and back in their traditional ways again. So it's sort of like this big event that happened, that the orcs were united, but they were united under the Whispering Tyrant, an undead lord. Around 4043, their warlord Kazavran was able to briefly reunite some of the tribes. This would have brought more orcs under his banner, probably reunited things, but a band of adventurers basically slayed him in his citadel in Scarwall. So, yes. He got murdered in 4043, and unfortunately that did not help for bringing back another orc reform at all. Now we are getting into a little bit of time, and last one, we'll just throw this fellow out here. We'll talk about him in a second, but he's an important part of orc history coming into the modern age, so we'll talk about him. So, the nation of Lastwall was established by the forces of the Shining Crusade in 3828, basically watching over the possibility of the Whispering Tyrant showing up again. But it was also bordered with the Hold. So in a way, they also became a bulwark against the orcs and their... Wait, sorry. Something that's been keeping the orcs from the Hold of Belkzen in checks was honestly infighting, but it doesn't mean that there weren't, like, raiding groups, battles, attacks, tribes attacking those outside the Hold. This was the first start of the way for a group that was basically keeping them in check and no longer as much of a threat in that region. The orcs of Belkzen continued to try to expand their territory southwards, pushing the border further towards the capital of Vigil. This country to their south that was fighting with them basically egged them on to continue to fight them even more. The official border between the Hold and Lastwall was set after the defeat of the Whispering Tyrant. So again, it's called Sunwall, as a series of mighty fortresses, and stood for hundreds of years. Next would be considered by a general, and followed the flow of the river Esk. There were places of low wall where new strongholds were built to connect these together. And again, these didn't really keep the Orc hordes back. The Sunwall, the line of it, fell in 4237. The Horde line was the next border and was built in 4515, and consists only of earthen bulwarks topped with wooden palisades. The last border of Lastwall has no name, and it's held due to money and supplies from countries from the south. It stood firm in Lastwall, but was destroyed by the freed Tar-Baphon in 4719. So there currently is no borderline there. But before we speak of the return of Tar-Baphon, we have to speak of this lovely, lovely fellow I've got shown here on the screen. This is Grask Uldeth, who is chief of the Empty Hand tribe, and seized control of the capital, Urgur, in 4692, and began reforms in Belkzen. He was powerful, intelligent. He saw the advantage of trading and not raiding neighboring kingdoms. He invited non-Orc tribes to settle in Urgur. He offered lower taxes and indifference to wares deemed abhorrent and illegal in other realms. He created a token system to allow foreigners to cross the southern plains of Belkzen relatively safely. A police-like organization in Urgur called the Closed Fish that kept an orcish version of the peace. These reforms continued until he was mysteriously killed by an assassin in 4716. His steward, Ardax the Whitehair, consolidated power using the warriors of the Closed Fist that renders command, and he'll be able to keep control of Earthgore, the large number of trove of dwarven weapons he discovered under the city, and training a group of rust monsters to serve him. So, Uldeth was a pretty big thing here to begin the changes that are probably pretty important. Yeah, he is an evil orc lord, a powerful barbarian who ruled with an iron fist, but they wanted to bring about a little bit more order and a little bit more society to their thing there too, which is an important thing about it. He was smart enough to see that there is more than just, a lot of it. He's very progressive thinking. And Ardax is a pretty good replacement as of now. Now, granted, Ardax, to talk about him a little bit, we're talking about the cold, he is very rare because he's middle-aged. There's not a lot of... You don't last long in a violent place like the Hold. But he's done his good. He was an advisor to Uldeth, and handled a lot of business that was kind of unworthy of his attention. And so he now really controls the city first and not really his tribe. Kind of the opposite thing. He's found his way to do that. But we do also have to mention the return of Tar-Baphon, because he freed from himself in the prison of Gallowspire. He sent a delegation to Ulgar to basically get the Orcs' subservience back. They remembered how they had been used and discarded by Tar-Baphon. And so they destroyed the emissaries of Lichkin, mounted their heads on the wall. Tar-Baphon sent an Orc army to teach them some humility. They met outside the plains there. And the Orcs managed to assemble a tribe from an army from the numerous tribes under the command of Ardax, and had the Battle of the Nine Broken Skulls in 4719, which was this climactic battle against the undead army that Tar-Baphon sent out there. The Tar-Baphon's army was defeated. This Orc tribes gathered together and managed to drive them back and win the day there. Yeah. So the lesson was not seen. Once the forces had been routed, Ardex strolled across the battlefield, picked up 10 fallen undead skulls. Before they amassed the assembled mass of orcs, he held the 9 aloft and named one of the undead they defeated before crushing its skull with his bare hands. The 10th skull he named Tar-Baphon and adorned it with cow horns to mock the tyrant. And this is an important thing in the Hold's history. And again, this is 4 years ago. This is another reason that Ardex now has a lot stronger power. Because this has united the Hold in a much stronger way. You know, he kind of had some power and managed to kind of grasp onto it for 3 years. Then Tar-Baphon did him a favor. He basically unified the different areas within the Hold. And now he is an overlord. He's surpassing Oldeth. He still does do a lot of Oldeth's ideas. You know, as an advisor, he probably advised Oldeth in a lot of these things like trading and stuff like that. And the thing is, if there is ever to deal with the Hold, he's the closest thing to a head of state that they have. But this great thing here, and Ardex, a middle-aged orc who's probably not quite as strong as he used to be, who, you know, is seen as maybe a little weaker, you know, someone that was more of a bureaucrat. He took over because he was an advisor, and, you know, he had this loyalty in this one very powerful police force and stuff there, showed himself a great war leader. And so these chieftains who might have seen force against him, seen him that he has a way to unite the Hold through war. Yes. It's a different way that shows that united together they are stronger, that they could take on any enemies that come in. Perhaps as much as these chieftains that fight amongst themselves and show power amongst the chiefs, that an overlord, someone that is great in war, might be needed for times of it, and they need an overlord to put over them. You know, it's an impressive thing that this battle has brought about, and calling it the Battle of the 9 Broken Skulls, mimicking the failed battle of the, or one of the ancient battles against the Dwarves to take the city of Orgur, the Battle of the 9 Stones, is an important part of talking about Belkzen and their way of doing things, very much so. Their history and kind of where they've developed themselves as a people. It's a fascinating look at them, at the Hold itself. So let's talk about the Hold and a little about what's in the Hold, and we'll talk about the government of the Hold as it stands, and some of the other locations you can visit in the Hold as we kind of talk about it. So as I told you, it's generally wild, dry, a dangerous river valley between the Kodar and Mindspring Mountains to the west. Kind of borders with Varisia there, the Tusk Mountain to the east, where it borders with Ustalav. To the north, it runs into the Fidget Algid wastes that stretch up in the realm of the Mammoth Lords, and of course down to the southern, more fertile southern plains of Lastwall, but also known as the Gravelands now. Because honestly, that's a thing to talk about, because Lastwall kind of got murdered by Tar-Baphon. We mentioned Lastwall, but they're kind of gone. And that's when we talk about the Gravelands / Lastwall in a future time. So, to the south, it's not so good anymore either. Let's talk about some reasons before we talk about their government. So, we have such great places as the Blood Plains! Yay, the Blood Plains! They're the region that kind of borders... actually, maybe we can go back to the... going back to the map, I think might nicer here as we talk about it. So, might be better to talk about these things here if we're using that little map there with the, mentioning the Blood Plains. Yes, the Blood Plains. A wonderful place to visit. You can spend some time there. Blistered Wall and the Foundry are over in that area, so you can see that is in the western part of the Hold, which are some cities that are there. It's bordered by the Kodar Mountains to the north, Mindspring to the south, the Flood River in the east. This is a very warfare-heavy area where the tribes frequently fight each other, kind of raid into each other, a lot of stuff like that. There is some mining here that kind of happens, but the caverns below Bristerwell, where there are mines, it's kind of anarchy, so there really isn't... There isn't a lot of stuff coming out of the mines. This disorganization is kind of there, unfortunately, with a lot of orc society. Again, places like Urgur is improving, but it's a slow process of improving, and we have a unifying force that could maybe bring about more changes and evolve the orc society slowly but surely, but it's a process. And a place like this, which is far from the big city, the smiths in Foundry kind of get as little ore as they can from it. Yeah. There's some famous battles that have been here. Blisteredwell is an actual city. It's got its mine shafts in it. And it's, yeah. It's a hell of a place to visit. Anyway, we can move on and we can look to the south, to the Conquered Lands. Yes. The Conquered Lands, which once were more of the border with Lastwall and the areas that the Hold had managed to take from Lastwall. That they were overrun with orc waves in various points in time, breaking the two various blockades. The Hardish blockade in 4482 and the Horde line, a little farther in 4517. This area was not claimed back by Lastwall. Now it's kind of their border with a country that's been reduced to an undead wasteland. So rather than trying to raid down that way, it's more of a defensive area for the orcs instead. Or perhaps they'll want to remove the undead or something. Honestly, they could want to kind of take that over and, remove the undead. And it's not got living people defending it much anymore. Yeah. So, Trunau is the big city that's down in this southern area here. And, yeah. What can I say about Trunau? There. This is a small town that remained in the Hold once the line was broken by the orcs. They basically survive here from 4517 when the Horde line fell. They're actually a settlement of non-orcs that kind of remain here too, and they've managed to hold their own for a couple hundred years at this point in time. Yeah. Currently though, they're kind of more connecting up with their local orcs. Chief Defender Halgra of the Blackened Blades has had many orcs among her past lovers at this point in time, and so has mothered many half-orc children. Basically, doing a good job of maybe finding a little bit of uniting with the local tribes and stuff through, honestly, interbreeding. Maybe that'll bring some better things? Who knows? Then we have to turn to a little bit to the north, over around the Dirt Sea and Smokespur. That region there. Yeah, it's some of the strangest sights in all the land in here, too. Because it's kind of like nestled in a lot of different things in this area here. It's near the Algrid Wastes to the north, which is certainly part of the realm of the Mammoth Lords. It's got the Dirt Sea. It's basically a area that is an extensive, extremely quicksand that's over 100 miles wide. Yes, 100-mile wide area of quicksand where it's basically water. And they have vessels which are created to basically cross this area here. And so they have voyages between places like Deepgate and Brimstone Harpspox, which are some of the settlements here. Brimstone Harpspox being a temple complex, basically to Orc religion. Deepgate being a massive Orc fortress within the mountains there. Yeah. So it's a very interesting area if you want to check it out. And of course, Wyvern Nesting is the most northern settlement there. It's another big city. It has timber forests, access to megafauna in the Algrid Wastes, to the north, the Flood Road to the east. It's basically the second most important city in all the Hold. So yeah, it is another big city. Of course, then we can talk about Urgir, the capital. We should talk about that a little bit because it's a fairly large city. It would, in fact, be considered a metropolis by population standards. Barely, you know. If I would talk about the population where we hit the levels of what Pathfinder considers or the Pathfinder considers a metropolis, it qualifies that, but, you know, it's only like 28,000 people when there are cities that have well over hundreds of thousands of people that live there. So, you know. Anyway, so this is a place as close to a centralized government that the entire Hold has. That's an important part to mention about this city. If we talk about this city for just a minute before we finish up talking about the various regions here. And Ardax the White Hare has basically done a very good job of maintaining its places almost like it's independent from what's going on with the tribes that battle themselves outside. And, you know, this area here is something that he's hoping to use to encourage cooperation and unity more about it, while the tribes may battle about themselves more. This might be seen as an area of unition between all of them. Yeah. That's the kind of way you have to think of it. Anyway. Again, it was Koldar, built by the Dwarves. And, kind of as I've talked about most of the history of this location here, too. It still has some of those old dwarven things, similar to how when I mentioned Ardax got some power because he found some dwarven weapons, along with taming some rust monsters, and the, police force that he basically had under his hold. These three things is basically what gave him a lot of power and the control of this region. Anyway, it's built on a small hole. It is a massive stone spires, dwarven monuments, and deep dwarrens that represent a multi-layer cake, multi-layered cake of 8 concentric tiers that rise up to the highest innermost level. Each is separated by defensive walls designed to protect touring Swedes or sieges. Each was dedicated to a different dwarven god. It once was around 100,000 folks at its heyday. Now it's again like maybe a third of that inhabitants. Many sections of the city are abandoned or underpopulated. The upper 4 tiers of the city, earthquakes have made places structurally unsound in parts of the city, and the Orcs aren't much to repair a lot of that damage, unfortunately. The city was supported from below by giant stone pillars of stone and iron deep beneath the earth. There are large rust monster infestations that affect the iron, the tremors that affect the, stone. The fact that the Hold remains, this place remains, is a testament how dwarf engineering is actually, Unfortunately, while a dwarf that would visit the city would understand the structural damage, the Orcs have basically remained unaware or uninterested that the entire area has, the threat of collapsing, and there have been localized collapses there. And similar to a lot of things, there are connections deep down to the Darklands. to the Darklands realm of Narvoth, because of the tunnels there. Remember that the sky... When I talked about dwarfs, the quest for the sky, they created these sky citadels. This was a former sky citadel. It was on the place where they came out from the Darklands. The tunnels here actually lead directly past the Dwargar city of Fellstock. And the rust monsters that infest the place keep the Grey Dwarfs from coming to the north. Good for them. Anyway, let's talk about the last region before we hit up a little bit more about the general government between the actual hold itself and even Urgir, because again, Urgir represents the hold. So the last of the main regions that I can kind of talk about here is the Whisperfall. So if you were to look for Whisperfall, look for... what's on the map here? Freedom Town? Where is it on the map here? I'm trying to find it on the map here and I can't find it. Oh, it's over... Okay, so it's the area east of the Flood River and near the Tusk Mountains. That's Whisperfall. Thank you. So the big thing that it has is there is the domain of two powerful red dragons, Shebelis and her mate, Tycarlis. So, yes. That's the big thing that you really can get in this area. A big old dragon continues to it. And again, Freedom Town is in this region. It's basically created by a criminal organization that was active in Lastwall, Ustalav, Nirmaths, and Multhium. They had fled Lastwall, made their kind of place here. Honestly, the dragons probably keep the orcs in check, and they just are small. Basically the only settlement mainly in this region. There are some smaller settlements, but it's the main one you talk about when you're talking about this area of the hold. So yeah. Go back to this one here. Okay, let's talk about the government of the hold as a whole. So again, one of the things here is there really isn't a unified government per se to the hold. Orcs aren't really good at maintaining an organized government. They are warriors that like to battle with each other, and are, that's one of those things is they respect power, they fight with each other. They respect the rule of mighty. They can, and will grudgingly respect given to those that are powerful enough to force other orcs to obey them. So again, if you find yourself that mightiness is not always physical strength, someone that might force someone's control for various reasons could be seen as mighty then too. And again, until recently, the most powerful was considered Grask Uldreth. But then he went away, and he ruled in Ulgur. He was beginning to unify things, and now, of course, we do have a new overlord over top of it. But a lot of the tribes are out there. I'm going to talk about tribes of Belkzen, but I can tell you the most important ones. I'm going to go over all of them, but the ones that are the most powerful that if you are going to deal with the tribes, you can know about. There's the Black Sun, the Blood Trail, the Broken Spine, the Cleft Heads, the Empty Hand, the Gut Spear, Haddoskar, the Murdered Child, the Twisted Nail, and the Wing Gripper tribes. We'll talk about all the tribes in a minute, but that's kind of what it is. Now, there are cities in Belkzen, but the cities are ruled by whatever tribe currently inhabits the city as its ruler, basically. That's the thing it is. So that's the thing is, it's not a very stable system. Cities can change hands from different tribes, usually at least once every generation. So cities change a lot. So there are cities there, it's just someone rules it or the next person rules it. The exceptions, of course, are things like Freedom Town, which orcs don't really live in because that's, it's not an orc settlement. I talked about that. It's a criminal exile kind of place. And, of course, Traunu, which, holds its own against the orc invasions. Those are both within there, but they're, again, governments onto themselves because of various reasons. Yeah. And that comes down to Ulgur, and of course, the things with it and being a side of government that is there now. You know, we had Oldeth ruling over basically the metropolis, ruling over the country almost, and now we've got Ardex the Whitehair, who, through the help of the Whispering Tyrant, has found himself in a much similar position, a greater position to that, and basically kind of controls the town. But if we're really talking the rulers of Ulfgar, there's also an important leader amongst it, which is their priest, the Nulgalt the Unpure, which is a very important person in Ulfgar, which is a priest of Rovagog. And basically served Grask Uldreth. Now that Uldreth is done, he's still in a position of power, as he is an important cleric too. And that's an entire thing about to talk about orcs. That's a thing about in Rovagong and their relationship with them. That's not a right now time. That's a different time. We're not going to talk about that right now. We'll get to that. That's a future episode. Let's go back to this nice image here, because we're going to talk about the tribes and some of the other inhabitants of the Hold. So let's talk about who's not. Let's talk about who's not an orc there. So there are some Thessalonian ruins that exist in the western plains of Belkzen, and there's some Shuanti tribes, members of the Shundra Kwa, of the Spire clan that live there. Shuanti being a type of nomadic people, humans, that are in this area. So we do have some humans in the region. Half-orcs are frequency in a lot of places in the land, too. It's a mixture of the violent interactions and stuff like that. Half-orcs, unfortunately, come about by a number of different reasons, and unfortunately, in a place like the Hold, where there's a lot of violence and a lot of terrible things that go on, violence is often connected to those. It's not always, as you can see with the town, where the leader of the town, you know, rather than taking someone from the town, takes some orc lovers from outside. It was just like, hey, you know, and has some half-orc children. That's a choice, too. Anyway, there's also small pockets of Oni-spawned tieflings. Basically, there were ogre-made mercenaries. That was a crash of Firefox and stuff. Oh, well, we're going to put that down for a second while I rebuild this and see what's going on. I think that's Discord that's crashed too. Yeah, that was Discord that crashed. Everything crashed. Wow! That was a heck of a thing. This version of Firefox has been stable. I continue talking about this for a little bit. I'll have to open up the tribes things. Give me a second to get my reference on the tribe list here. I like technical issues. It just makes for wonderful things. So there are basically those that are Oni-blooded tiefling because of the various ogre mages that have found their way to working within the Hold and existing there. And, you know, they get into relationships with people and boom, there you go, a tiefling of that blood. So, orcs are the main thing. And we're going to talk about the tribes in themselves. There isn't a lot of order in the tribes themselves. A orc tribe within the Hold tends to be orcs. Oftentimes will include slaves. And will also sometimes include actually accepted members of other races. Giants, ettins, and ogres tend to be accepted. Those tend to be the others. But again, you know, anyone that proved themselves for the tribe and within the tribe could probably earn acceptance. Those tend to be the main ones that you find, though. The hierarchy is very unstable. There's constant warfare to maintain balance between the powers of the tribes. There's alliances and feuds that rarely last very long. Battle menageries are something that happens. Battled monsters will kind of be put together. Siege engines are kind of used. things like threats from Tar-Baphon or external threats have begun actually to help changes, though. In the last couple of years, we've found honestly, a lot less battling between these tribes. You know, there's like distrust of outsiders, or, you know, that was kind of there. And some threats like Tar-Baphon have, like, reaching out to neighbors and stuff. So, all these millennia, we're beginning to see something different in Orc society. Remember, warriors have always been in charge. But now, individuals who are not warriors are finding more prestige and influence. It's an interesting thing to think that we have chat window. That's not the right one. Turn that off. There we go. We're getting changes in the hold. Big ones. They're slowly coming about, but they are something. And something major could occur to help drive it. Sorry about the image. That'll eventually load up again, hopefully at some point soon. As I go over the list of tribes. Cool. That loaded up very well. Let me just make sure this is on. Boom. Chat's back. Does it pop up? It does! Successfully! Hey! Things I'm not going to check anything else right now with the reset. We'll leave that for a moment. We're going to get back to that. I will leave that and worry about what's going on with, you know, a crash of the system in a minute. Anyway, so let's talk about the most prominent of all the tribes. And I talked about the ones that have the most power. But the most power does not mean necessarily prominence. I'm not going to go deep into any of these tribes significantly. Most of them, there isn't a lot of information on them. There's a little bit. I can tell you things like their leaders and stuff like there. But, you know, we're going to do our best to talk about all of them. So, the Bear Slayer tribe, whose leader is Krogut, is a newly formed Orc tribe who's began raiding basically Traunu's outer holdings in 4713. So it's a new battle that's trying to take on and finally conquer Traunu. Kroghut was a leader of the Broken Spine Orc tribe that kind of occupied the keep in the Mindspire Mountains in Hell's Fury. When a Pathfinder burned down the spire, he survived the Inferno and basically managed to avoid execution for incompetence by humiliation of his tribe, formed a new tribe. So that's where that one comes from. The Black Sun tribe has traces all the way back to Belkzen himself. Because remember, the standard of Belkzen was the Black Sun. So the leader today is Krun Thrul. It's a strong and influential tribe. And other Orc leaders dispute this claim that, you know, though others support it, plenty of them do support the fact that if there's a major undertaking by the Hold, it should be supported by the Black Sun tribe. And again, there are leaders that say no to that. So, unlike a lot of other tribes of Belkzen, the Black Suns don't claim any land and instead offer service to any tribes during the yearly proving time. The Blood Trail tribe are nomads who raid and pillage throughout Belkzen. It's led by Kring the Beautiful, and keeps the tribe on the move. Her quest is to find a male orc mate. She's looking for, I guess, the perfect mate in her eyes, and she is one of the few female orc chieftains. She's strong enough to maintain that hold of that, because strength oftentimes comes from physical strength for most chieftains. It's why, unfortunately, many female orcs, generally speaking, sexual dimorphism stuff. We'll put it that way. But she is in charge and looking for that perfect male for herself. The Broken Spine tribe once had that fortress in the Mindspire Mountains known as Helen's Folly. They really hate humans, and especially Pathfinders. Their current leader is the bloodthirsty Nearling Save Chief Hogrot. But the tribe is really led from behind the scenes by their shaman, Magra the Mad. You know? So, yes. The Clefthead tribe is near the Pinkskins settlement of Freedom Town, which Pinkskin is their term for humans. Their tribe is known as cowards to other orc tribes and said to be the last to the battle, first to flee. It's got a succession of chiefs over top of it, and Khazard the Drover is the currently one. The unruly orcs of this tribe are constantly well-stocked with spoils, especially alcohol, that keeps them from rebelling against their leader. The Closed Fist is not necessarily a tribe, but we do have to mention it here because it is the military branch, kind of, that exists because of that. So we do kind of have to mention it as its own group because it sort of is, and it's one of the reasons why, we have this power there. The Deadeye tribe, they live in the Kodar Mountains near Brimstone Harspucks. Their primary religion is that of the one-eyed orc deity. It's claimed to be Rovagug's father, though the name of the deity is lost. These are primitive, cruel, even by orc standards. They live in filthy caves located between Brimstone Harpucks and the Dirt Sea. They raid civilized tribes and eat their victims. They consider themselves keepers of the original orc culture. The barbarian Face Ripper is currently their leader. They're the ancient one-eyed deity they called... So, their deity is basically considered maybe a gestalt of Varix, the Blood God, and Zaragresh, the Destroyer. Anyway, the Death's Head tribe recently allied themselves with Uldreth, so they operate entirely within the hold, usually around Urgur, where they man the walls and gate the great city, with their leader, Ungot Helmspitter. Again, Death's Head has maintained loyalty, especially with, what happened with Harpathon, has maintained that kind of loyalty there to maintain the hold of the capital city. The Defiled Corpse tribe is one of the most dangerous tribes. They reveal Zon Cthulhu, and their appearance is horrific. Zon Cthulhu is basically an outer creature. One of the most twisted and evil minds in the great beyond. Kind of a horrible thing there, just to note that. They torture their captives, but they also torture themselves as a sign of endurance and devotion. Their tribe is basically feared and reviled by other orc tribes. A shaman of the Defiled Corpse tribe called Unguk Fleshdredge created a terrible flesh golem called the Carcass Man of Belkzen is within their tribe, and Bugark Zamash is their leader. So, yep. They're pleasant people. Of course, Ardex, the former leader, remember, we talked about the Empty Hand tribe. Ardex is the current leader of the Empty Hand tribe, has managed to maintain that leadership. First over Urgen, but now their tribe. They're the ones that control Urgen. They're the main ones in charge of that. They are de facto the ruling tribe of Belkzen, the Empty Hand tribe. Garrisk Old Death had them become law-abiding by orc standards and welcoming outsiders to trade. So again, like, there is a violence to them, but like it's like there's more rules in place. And one of those things, this attitude has actually helped out. The Empty Hand tribe is the best armed force in all the region, and rightfully feared by other tribes. You know, Ardax has done something, though, for the tribe. Though Ardax is an overlord and a war leader, he is only the acting chief of the tribe. He still claims only to be a steward and has left the throne empty, actually. And this is maybe a symbolic gesture that, like, you know, which might actually be very important when it comes to the entire rulership of the Hold and uniting the orc tribes. Ardax, the overlord, claims not to be a tribal leader. Not from one tribe, but maybe from all the tribes. We continue to see the ways that the Hold might evolve into an actual society, and some of the violence and murder and death will go away. Not for some of these tribes. Some of these tribes are going to continue violence, murder, and death. You're not getting rid of that. The Gut Spear tribes are in the caves of Kodar Mountains. They emerge to raid villages and farmsteads in the foothills. Their leader is Drog Tenheads. The Hadasgard tribe, or Hadasgard clan, control the city of Blistered Well with the One-Eyed tribe. They're led by Tulak Clovenface, who hates the Moloch Dwarf Mangler, leader of the One-Eyed tribe. So, Tulak is supporting the war with the One-Eyed tribe by his clan shaman, Yask Rockcaller. Hadask is not originally from the Hold, but is a Darklands orc tribe. Merging in 4701 as part of a truce with the Dwergar of Felstock. They kind of warred in the deep areas there. Basically, the Haddock's tribe exchanged a large amount of slaves and high-quality Dwergar weapons and armor. War Marshal Bithune granted the Haddock this and granted the, in exchange for them attacking and conquering the surface city of Blisterwall. Effectively, which Wormas Bithune is a Dwergar that basically controls that city. Effectively, the Dwergar have been looking to get to the surface and find a way to basically invade the surface, and convincing this orc tribe to basically conquer one of the cities, join with their orcer brethren, get into a battle with it is their excuse to hopefully maybe get a beachhead there. Yeah. The Dwergar hope to destabilize the current control of in Urgen, which is kind of more difficult at this place, and basically put an orc puppet in place on the throne, and basically go into slaving operations in the surface. Dwergar are pretty terrible. We'll talk about them in the future. Anyway, so yeah. The Open Barrow tribe claims the lands north of Urgen, in between the Hold and Ustalav, and Mazok Skullface rules them. The Mangled Limb tribe is in eastern Kodak Mountains in the Hold. They are known to be the first tribes to encountered by Mother Chot as she reached the surface from the Darklands. Mother Chot being a extremely old orc alchemist who breeds and creates horrible flesh-warped and necromantic creations in Dretha's Cradle in the northern part of the Hold. So, yep. She used that flesh-warping knowledge to integrate herself to tribal leaders and basically establish that. The Murdered Child tribe controls Wyvern's Sting and the Dirt Sea in Belkzen. Hunduk's Half-Man, the only half-orc tribal chieftain, leads them, and is one of the two most powerful individual clan leaders, only rivaled by, originally, Earldreth until he disappeared. The tribe's battle lord and shaman is Gren Tuax. The One-Eyed tribe shares Blisterwell Balkan, holds Blisterwell with the Hadoska tribe, led by, as I said, then Molk, Dwarf Mangler, and those two hate themselves, infight a lot. The Severed Hands is the well-known tribe in the Mandor Mountains. The Shattered Fang. I don't have their leader. Ferocity for this one and the next one after this one too. Known for ferocity and keeping their oaths, live in the Mandor Mountains. The Skittering Ravengers is the plague of the Skitter Mounds. They have unfortunately been wiped out, so they're a tribe that is known about but has been wiped out. That plagued Skitter Mounds, they were wiped out soon after conquering Skull Hill. Okay. The fortress was kind of destroyed by them in 4709, who were terrorizing the region. Something happened that wiped them out after doing that. And there's 4 more tribes to talk about before we're done. And each tribe does have a tribal banner. This is a tribal banner that's kind of showing one of them that we have here, but there are tribal banners. This is one that kind of represents the entire hold. That kind of represents the tribe. Skull Eaters are in the Skull Eater tribe, is in the eastern hold, on the slopes of Whisperfall Pass, kind of close to Ustalov, county of Canterwall. Basically, they control and tax any orcs wishing to raid human lands. Basically, it brings them to conflict with the Blood Trail tribe, who control the western approaches to the pass. And Gribik Gut Eater is their leader. The Steel Eater are a cult of tribeless half-mad orc smiths and engineer that hold over the Foundry, which was an ancient fortress in that region. And it basically was under dwarf control during that time. The Steel Eaters use the ancient dwarven metalworks to manufacture most of many new orc arms and siege weapons. Other orc tribes have learned the lesson that try to get the Foundry by force is very risky. The Steel Eaters produce the best weapons in the region and sell them to all tribes without bias, meaning the tribe who angers the cult comes at a disadvantage. So basically, the fact that they are the Foundry, the Steel Eaters, and the major place that arms manufactures and trades with all the tribes means that no one tribe would want to conquer them because it would piss off all the other tribes and stuff like that, you know. The Twisted Nail tribes are colloquially the Mountain Orcs. They're another primitive clan. They live high in the mountains of the Hold of Belkzen. They're kind of violent and cultured to the lowland tribes. The Twisted Nail lives in the northern Mindspire Mountains, and prefer the flesh of other orcs to any other kind of meat. They are cannibalistic. Makosh is their leader. And the Wing Gripper tribe, or the Wing Ripper tribe. Oh, God, I'm messing that one up. Is a clan of a small tribe of orcs living around Wyvern Spire and Hold of Belkzen. They prowl the high peaks of the settlement, seeking young wyverns to tame. Despite heavy losses to such a process, they've managed to tame a number of wyverns, and the tribe is feared because of that. And Chief Molag is a tribe of them. So, orc wyvern riders are a big part of them. Orc language is the main language that they speak in the region. It's their own guttural language. Orc or Orcish is a very harsh, violent language full of sharp, hard consonants. It uses the Dwarven alphabet and is the only place as a majority language is, of course, the Hold. To note that there. There are a few orcs who live in Urgern who deal with outsiders who do speak Common, but it's very rare within the Hold. But I hope you've learned enough, because that's the Hold of Belkzen in a nutshell. Whew! Yes, I did my best to go over the full Hold there as best I can and give enough information so that you understand this place. Because certainly, it's a place of a people who are very primitive, very violent, who live and die by the sword, basically, and live and die by power and strength. And a lot of old practices, a lot of the violence that comes about from the orc culture here still remains, but it's seeing that maybe evolution is something that could be done to these people. And there are certainly other orcs in other places in the world where we can talk about them when we talk about orcs, where this kind of thing comes about a lot more and is something that has to be seen more as a change. I will have discussions on orcs in the future where we can learn more about them. But the Hold itself is an important part of talking about that. It represents both new and old culture when it comes to orcs. In good and bad ways, I would say, too. You know, the Hold is both the worst and maybe best parts to come in the Hold. That's a hard thing to say. But they have a deep history and find themselves through a lot of areas in Golarion. Even in the Darklands. There are people that you can kind of see on and have this history. Certainly things like half-orcs show that history. The sometimes tumultuous relationship between orcs and humans, which, you know, that's how it started out with. And certainly there have been plenty of times it happens too. But there's also places that find love and stuff too. And maybe that's a sign that, you know, and especially with the new changes that are slowly happening in orc culture, especially brought upon by a powerful, revolutionary individual that changes things, followed by a terrible, overwhelming threat in an undead lord like Tar-Baphon, a incredibly powerful lich who could only be sealed away powerfully, who destroyed an entire country, failing to conquer them. A unifying force that could bring about insane changes for the society merely a number of years ago. That's the kind of thing that can be seen as maybe a new evolution of this ancestry, of this species, whose violence has been the thing they've only known, and maybe there's more to it. And of course you do have outliers that are going to be always violent and deadly. And certainly talking about the different tribes, you see there are tribes that are even disliked by orcs, you know? There are plenty of tribes that are seeing it. And there's plenty of things that go on in the Hold as itself that represent orc kind and the Hold that will see different things in the future. Will we see a Dwergar invasion from the Darklands? Will we see different changes? Will we see more connecting with things like humans and stuff, and tribes finding themselves changing and evolving? These individuals who aren't ruling by force, that are finding influence, that are others within the tribes finding influence. This raiding, hatred of civilization, violent attitude that is orcs, when I talk about them, the warlike nature of them, that is representative of the Hold itself, changing and evolving. And while other orcs might not take it, maybe here in the Hold is where now is that first spark of orc civilization. What it can represent. Not a civilization like any other. And perhaps violence will never go away. This condition for power will never go away. But maybe something new can be born out of it. I'd be interested to see how we see the evolution and the storylines to come. The Hold is at a point in its existence that makes it a very interesting place. And certainly, adventures could be had here. The orcs are still a threat in many ways. And there are plenty of tribes which are very violent, very deadly, and very terrible. Plenty that maybe negotiations could be made with. There's a lot to say. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed learning about another country? Region? Within Golarion. One that is a marker of a lot of old histories. And contains a lot of history itself, in a way, and a very unique culture. If you want to watch these things live, I'm on Twitch. I'm on Twitch right now. We had to kind of crash of something there, but, you know, I stream every Tuesdays and Thursdays, early afternoon, usually between 1 and 2 in the afternoon. I start the stream. I talk about tabletop like this, 1 or 2 topics, usually 1, sometimes 2 if one of them is a shorter one. Saturdays at between 11 and noon, usually for just one shorter one or a single topic. They go up on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, go check out Twitch. Leave a follow. See us live. If you're watching this on Twitch, hey, come into the YouTube side. A lot of videos there. Following for Twitch, subscription, a like, ring that bell for more alerts, some comments, great on for engagement on the YouTube side. Have you used the Hold of Belkzen? And what do you make of what's going to happen with orc culture? Because again, orcs have always been seen as kind of almost like a monster in a lot of fantasy settings coming down from D&D. And they still have that thing there. Tolkien and orcs. This is where the thing comes down from. And I feel like this is a chance for the redemption of orcs to come about in, where a lot of that violent culture that has been seen in a lot of the popular fantasy, the Hold might be used to evolve it into something new. And I'm curious as to those of you out there, do you think that's what's going to happen here? I can see that maybe happening. And I'm curious if those see that also happen. We might see something new and interesting here. Anyway, I have a Discord. I have a website formerly known as Twitter. I give schedules, what's going on, when I'm going live, random information there. Make sure to check them out. Those are good places to see all those things. I think that's it for shout-outs for stuff. Make sure you check out everything. I thank all of you out there. I hope you enjoyed learning about the orcs and the Hold of Belkzen. It's going to mimic a lot of what I talk about when I talk about orcs in a week or two. But remember that, because, you know, we'll see when we talk about them as a culture in Golarion a little bit more. This, you know, marks it up. But anyway, until that next time, when I talk about things in the future and more tabletop things, I bid all of you out there a farewell.